So let's look at those diets. So there are many diets. I have about 13 different diets in my book that I describe. There are probably 3 or 4 main autism diets, so that's what we'll focus on. The gluten and casein free, or the GFCF diet, is the main diet that most people start with and implement. This is going to be eliminating gluten. That's the protein in wheat, rye, barley, and then 2 little grains called spelt and kamut. And then oats, commercially made oats, also have gluten, not because they're in the oat, but because of cross-contamination. So you can find gluten-free oats that you can buy special from online. But if you go to the grocery store, you won't be able to find gluten-free oats in any of the oat products they have there. And casein is the protein found in dairy. So in the gluten and casein-free diet, we eliminate these. And you can see when the Autism Research Institute, their website is autism.com, they have a wonderful list of thousands of parents that have participated in a survey on which diets, supplements, nutrients, interventions helped their children the most. And diet consistently comes up near the top of that list, gluten and casein being one of the best things that exists of all of the medications, supplements, and diets. Diets right at the top, and GFCF is one of the top ones of all the diets. And there are several thousand parents that have gone ahead and rated this diet as being helpful for their child. So this is not a diet that you may have heard from people out there that diets don't help, that there's no scientific foundation for diets. Well, I'm hoping that we're demystifying some of the scientific foundation. But I think that parent experience and child experience is the most valuable piece of the puzzle. And we see over and over again stories about how GFCF has been helpful for children. The next part of that is other food sensitivities, things like soy or corn, citrus, peanuts, chocolate, cane sugar. These substances also, we often want to remove these. We don't want to necessarily just remove them all. There are ways through diets as well as testing to figure out what type of a sensitivity someone might have. And this is different than an allergy. A food allergy is you break out in hives, you go into anaphylactic shock. That's a very dangerous, potentially life-threatening allergy. These are food sensitivities. This is a different type of a delayed immune system response. And these create more things like constipation, diarrhea, depression, pain, things like that, more chronic conditions. And they take sometimes a couple days to appear. So if you eat eggs every day in your diet and your child, or milk, and your child is constipated, and you can't make a food association, well, it's very difficult to make an association until you remove it and see how they do without it. The Feingold diet, this is the diet I mentioned Dr. Ben Feingold when he looks at reducing the phenols or salicylates that are in certain foods. And these are naturally occurring substances that are in certain fruits and vegetables, whether they're organic or not, they're just naturally there. And they're things like apples, grapes, a lot of fruit has them, citrus, peaches, all sorts of vegetables, tomatoes, as well as certain vegetables like zucchini and others. And for certain children that have this particular sulfation challenge, these foods can create hyperactivity, red cheeks, red ears, things like that. So there's some of the common things. Aggression, sometimes some of the classic things you'll see is a child that eats artificial ingredients and for the next 2 hours is just running around crazy and maybe being a little aggressive with his classmates and things like that. Also, the body ecology diet. This diet is one that I briefly mentioned that is used a lot for yeast overgrowth, a wonderful diet that includes some principles of keeping sugars low and adding fermented foods in and a variety of other principles. The specific carbohydrate diet, I skipped over that one. That one is a diet that's fairly limiting in terms of carbohydrates, but it is not a low carbohydrate diet. It just reduces, it actually eliminates the polysaccharides and the disaccharides and sticks with the monosaccharides, those things that absorb pretty immediately in the gut. Little digestion is needed, and that way you don't feed the gut organisms, the bad bacteria, the yeast, and that sort of thing. So you break that cycle. And so it keeps carbohydrates to vegetables, fruits, honey, those are all monosaccharides, and it eliminates all grains, all starchy potatoes. It does become limiting, but it can be very helpful for certain kids that have serious gut problems. The Nourishing Traditions diet, or the Weston A. Price, this is another diet that I really like. This is just a general healthy diet for everybody. I like to incorporate some principles of these whenever I can. These are things like grass-fed, again, fermented foods, all these times of as the more nutrient dense that we can get, good broths and things like that. And this is a good diet for people that want to just start getting some good nourishment for their family. And then the low oxalate diet is a newer diet that's come around, but there's been some great work by Susan Owens, who's a researcher, looking at these oxalates creating inflammation in the gut. And when the gut's leaky, they can leak through and create damage in the tissues. They go to the site of damage and they create a lot of inflammation and pain. And so depending on what's going on for a particular child, you may want to eliminate, or actually not eliminate, you can't really eliminate, but reduce oxalates. So where do we start with all of that? Well, I'm going to talk about the foundational diets, and in my book, the 4 foundational diets are the ones I'm going to describe next. When in doubt, if you're confused, I wanted to explain all of that other information so that if you hear those diets thrown around, you're not confused. You have at least some basic understanding of them. But for those of you that are new, the gluten and casein-free diet is often the place that most people start. Like I said earlier, about 65% of the kids get some benefit from this diet. Now, the ones that don't get benefit from the diet, there's a couple things going on. You have to implement this diet very strictly. So you can't, like, I took out milk for a couple weeks, but maybe there's a little cheese in the diet. It has to be very strict, 100% of that gluten and casein out of the diet for a period of typically 3 to 6 months to really see. But if you are really strict, sometimes you can see even results within a week, or sometimes I've seen in a few days, or in a couple weeks. So just kind of keep in mind you should get some immediate and then some more long-term benefits from this diet. Then there is a percentage of people, like everything, nothing helps 100%, but 65% is a pretty large number. There are some children it doesn't help with. Often what we then do is go to the specific carbohydrate diet. So if I see children with a lot of gut inflammation, some kids have really severe gastrointestinal issues, constant diarrhea, inflammatory bowel diseases and things like that, where they did GFCF and maybe they got a little benefit, but they're really still having some serious digestive problems. I would look at the specific carbohydrate diet. I've heard stories from parents. There are a couple specific stories. I met a woman a few months ago. Her child had such severe inflammation that he was on steroids, and they had to take him off the steroids, and the mom was really concerned because this child off steroids had, bloody bowel movements 24 hours a day and just in serious discomfort and pain. And so she was really, really concerned. Well, she had tried GFCF and it didn't work. Well, within a short time on the specific carbohydrate diet, all of that discomfort went away, and now I spoke with her, and I think it's a few years later, her son is going back to eating a much, much more normal diet because her son was able to break whatever inflammatory cycle was going on and get back to a place of some healing. And so his diet has expanded. So these are not necessarily lifelong diets. Some of them are for some people, depending on what's going on, but not always. Sometimes they just help to heal the gut so that we can move on to eat a more varied diet. My goal with working with anyone is to have the least amount of restriction necessary, but restricting those things that are really causing a problem. And I wanted to highlight one example of the gluten and casein-free diet, one of those more kind of wonderful jumps that I've seen. So there was a child that I'm working with that's 2.5, and he had no language, he had 0 words, and he was 3 months on the gluten and casein-free diet, and he went from 0 to 200 words in 3 months. So this is an example of how if you have a foggy brain and opiates being produced or this opiate type effect where you're just not able to concentrate, you take away that fog and amazing things can happen. So it's just some things to think about. The body ecology diet is often a great diet for yeast overgrowth. The Weston A. Price diet is a good diet to start with if you're hesitant to remove foods, if you're not ready to go there, or even layering it on top of other diets you're doing, getting these good nourishing principles in.